And areas like upstate New York, some parts of Southern California, and this is just talking to people I know in those areas, you know, they've lost everything. I mean, forget 80, 90%, they've lost 100%. They lost every single hive.
Wow.
And I don't know the man, but I heard from another person who knows a gentleman in Florida who took his hives to Montana. And when he got there, the bees were alive. They came back, I think it was 7, 10 days later, and literally every hive, there wasn't a bee around anywhere. I mean, they were just gone. And so what that tells me, and also based on just my gut feeling, is that it is exposure to pesticides, and it's a new class of pesticides. There's been a lot of research on neonicotinoids and other types of pesticides like that. Of course, that may not be 100% of the reason. There may be other things like travel fatigue with, you know, the cross-country pollination and stuff like that. But it wasn't, things didn't get really bad until these other chemicals started being introduced, the neonicotinoid brands. And you know, 60, go ahead.
No, I mean, break down what that particular is, because the studies I saw even going back 5 years ago in Germany and other places were that where Bt crops are grown. And for those that don't know, that's a pharmacological crop, right, where the corn and other crops grows on average about 1,000 times higher level of a natural pesticide that's fungus-based, and whereas insects eat it, they die. And so, yeah, and then you pass it on to humans, and there's all the connections to organ failure and things in mammal species that are mainline science, and you know, that's been connected as part of the cocktail. Is that the same type of pesticide or something different?
Well, I don't know enough about pesticides from a chemical point of view to know if that is exactly it. Well,
these are pharmacological crops where it's, I mean, as you know, in the crop itself.
Oh, I see, where the seed is coated.
Yes.
The chemical, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that, because in case in point, cotton. Okay, you take a cotton seed, you coat it, as most commercial cotton seeds are these days, with, you know, a certain chemical, whatever that chemical may be, and you plant it in the ground, it comes up, bees are attracted to cotton. So they're going to go there and they're going to pick up that, plus they're going to pick up pesticides that have been sprayed over. So it's kind of like a coming up from the bottom, coming down from the top. The bees get hit both ways, and they survive just long enough to bring that pollen back to the hive, and you end up with some cotton honey that's laced with all these other pesticides. You know, there are very few people within the government that I trust to do a really good job, but one of them is a scientist named Dr. Jonathan Barber at the USDA Honey Lab, and I believe he's in North Carolina. And you know, he did a screen on our honey. He's actually done several screens on our honey for pesticides, and it was an exhaustive one. Like, they tested for several hundred pesticides, and they tested down to not parts per million, but parts per billion. And with ours, they found nothing below 7 parts per billion. And that was just remarkable. He said to me, he said, you know, we get honeys in here almost every day that are, you know, so laced with pesticides, it's like, you know, it's unbelievable that people would even be allowed to eat this stuff. And he didn't name names, but the assumption is that it's, you know, some of these larger national brands. And so I don't know if that's true or not, but, you know, just, you know, he's a scientist for the USDA. He's not going to come out and say which ones are which, but, you know, if you were to go one step further with this report by Andrew Schneider, you know, of Food Safety News, and, you know, take these honeys that have been shown to not have any pollen and then also test them for pesticides, it would get very expensive, but I think it would also be very revealing.
And by the way, I was talking to Mike Adams, and you'd also brought this up. You were the one that recommended to Andrew Schneider, this reporter, I think you said a year ago, to go test these big brand name honeys and see if they were devoid of pollen, and he actually went and did it. So now you're saying, now go test for pesticides.
Yeah, I would love to see him do that. I mean, I don't have the money to do that.
Because you've had your honey tested, and you were saying, he was saying it was one of the lowest you'd ever seen.
It wasn't Andrew Schneider. It was the USDA scientist,
yeah.
It's Jonathan Barber.
Can I see it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's amazing. Now again, this is Round Rock honey. I've never bought this. I thought it looked great. I always bought Fane's because my uncle worked there for a decade, and he said, no, this is real honey.
Right.
And this is, you know, very, very low pesticide type honey, you know, kind of wild honey being picked up. Right. And I said, is Fane's good? And you said, oh, yeah,
Yeah, Fane's is good. And I think also the other side of this is that while this is showing several honeys that you don't want to buy because they've had all the honey filtered, or I'm sorry, all the pollens filtered out, there are many, many brands, mainly from smaller producers that people can buy that are very good. You know, one of those is Fane's, one is ours, one is well, I'd have to think some more about some of the others, but they're, you know, all over the country. If you know the beekeeper and if you're able to go out and see their hives and all of that, then, you know, I would buy honey from a beekeeper you know in your area.
Do I get to keep this?
You can keep that as long as you know you got to share some with these other guys over here.
Oh my gosh, you guys! I'm like Winnie the Pooh.
Taste it.
Well, I don't want to stick my finger in it.
Hey,
hey guys, will you bring me a spoon?
Honey is naturally antibacterial.
I know it is. I know it is. They're just
There you go.
Anyways,
let me say one thing about Andrew Schneider.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I had a conversation with him 2 years ago, and I talked to him just yesterday by phone and by email. And I said to him, I said, well, do you remember that conversation we had 2 years ago? And he said, well, let me put it this way. Today I got 7,000 emails in response to this. So he's getting, you know, 7,000 to 10,000 emails a day in response to this article as it's spreading all over the world. And he said, you know, don't take this personally, but I don't remember the conversation, but I don't doubt that we had it. So I said to him, I said, well, I remember it very well because I was very hopeful that you would take it and run with it.
Well, that doesn't even matter. The point is that you're doing a great job, and it's very, very exciting. And you know, here you live right here in Austin, Texas, and we just appreciate everybody's work exposing this. You know, it's also coming out that most of the cereal that they claim that is organic isn't, and this stuff is just causing such an amazing problem. I'm gonna try some of this right now.
Well, let me tell you something about organic and honey after you taste this, and I'll.
Oh man, I love good honey. Here we go. Now it's turned into a food show.
This honey right here has a lot of hackberry and tickweed and broomweed and grasses.
Winnie the Pooh. Sorry.
Yeah, it's pretty good stuff.
Let me tell you, I'm not just saying this because you're here, because I'm not a BSer. Better than Fane's.
Well, thank you. Don't tell Fane that, though. I mean, I like the guy. He's a great guy.
No, it's good. That is really good honey. Yeah. But, you know, some people don't like the real honey. They don't like the raw stuff.
Well, you know, if they don't like raw honey, then what do they like? I mean,
exactly.
What's not to love in honey? So,
well, I mean, I know there's a lot of other points that after we end this interview that I would have wished I asked and you would have wished that you made. You know, being kind of a honey master of sorts, what else should we know about what's going on in the world of honey and how it ties into overall agriculture? Because we're seeing government harassment of small farms, ranches, people selling lemonade, people growing gardens in their own yards, people having organic cookouts. I mean, government really seems to be scared of real agriculture. Why is that?
You know, that's the $1 million question. It's probably more like a $100 million question. I really don't know why they're scared, but I can tell you from my own personal experience that, you know, we had a question, just a simple question about the presence of a negative test result that we got back from a USDA lab on the West Coast that was recommended to us. The same lab that tests many of these, most of the honeys on the West Coast for the presence of pesticides. They also test foods and things like that. And they reported to us that that they came back to us and said that there was a presence of a chemical called carbofuran, which is extremely deadly to bees. It's deadly on contact. So there's no way if bees were in the presence of this chemical that they would be able to bring it back to the hive. And so basically, I wrote them and I said, well, how could there be carbofuran in it? The scientist went back and he tested and he said, oops, our mistake. And he wrote me a very nice letter apologizing profusely, but that set into motion a 5-year investigation which just ended yesterday. 5-year investigation by the USDA and the EPA. They both came down. They sent various departments of health. They put us through the ringer 9 ways to Sunday, and the assumption was that we were guilty until proven innocent, not the other way around.
And you were sending it to be testing because you wanted to know. You've sent your stuff to other government labs, and they said best ever. So again, you're there researching your own self, and then they're freaking out because I guess they don't want to really talk about this. I bet these big mega companies, you know, that you were kind of alluding to earlier, I mean, you said that the head scientist said, yeah, I don't know why they're allowed to do this.
Right. There's definitely a double standard. If you're a small up-and-coming company and you don't have the money to, you know, really defend yourself, then they're going to treat you like a whipping child. I mean, you know, it's just there's no two ways about it. And I mean, I went so far as to write a letter to then President Bush and work through the city of Round Rock, to work through a number of people in Washington, D.C. to address this member. And I eventually spoke with the man who was the former head of the FDA, And then I spoke with the field investigator in Dallas for, I think it was the EPA. I could be wrong about the organization, but I spoke with some pretty senior folks. And they said, okay, well, we're going to check into this and we're going to look into it. But then nothing happened, you know? And it was like, so you're basically intent on harassing me. And I said that directly to him. And he said, no, we don't harass people. And it's like, well, what is this? And I said, when all this is over, am I going to get an apology? And there was no response to that. Well, I got a form letter yesterday saying, hey, we concluded and we found exactly what you said, that there was nothing in it. No apology, no nothing. And I just thought to myself, you know, I really need a, you know, I could wring someone's neck over this. I mean, it was just absolutely insulting. And if I hadn't been the combative type, they would have just steamrolled me, you know? I mean, in other words, if I hadn't taken them on and took them to task, saying, look, I have this testing, I know what's real, and you can't tell me what you think is real because your results have been proven to be bad and mine have been proven to be good over and over and over again. And so, you know, but they never apologize. They'll never admit, hey, we screwed up. That's our mulligan. You know, they won't say that. So,
Konrad, in closing, how important are bees to the global ecosystem? And I mean, is it a serious alarm bell that all over the world they're dying en masse?
Can I say hell yeah on TV? I mean,
well, if it's killing them, what's happening to us?
Well, here's what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen. If we don't start putting a beehive in every backyard, if we don't start getting people more interested in bees and keeping bees and all of that, and people go into our beekeeping school and doing all those sorts of things, you better get used to eating rice and oatmeal because that's about all you're going to get. You're not going to get nuts. You're not going to get fruits. You're not going to get most vegetables like squashes and things like that. I mean, you know, so the bees, they do the majority. They do, you know, the load, the biggest load of pollination. And so you're not going to see the grocery stores. In the grocery stores,
yields would go way down. I mean, they've estimated like 60% without them.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's actually more like 60 to sometimes even 80% of the stuff, depending on the grocery store, depending on, you know, like if you're in a Whole Foods versus a Sam's Club, you know, how much of the produce section do they have? This would, if bees went around, you wouldn't have. You just wouldn't flat out, you just wouldn't have blueberries.
Is the establishment, not just government, but like the big mega agri, are they even concerned about this? Or?
Well, I mean, like I said, I don't exactly have the kind of relationship with the government or with big agri that where we talk around.
Sure, but I mean, just from being, you know, from researching, I mean, do they seem to be concerned about colony collapse at all? Or?
Well, you know, the government responds to things like colony collapse by starting a program or a study or doing something like that. And you know, we're in a crisis situation. This is not the time to study the issue.
Yeah, we know the bees are dying.
Right.
This isn't like Al Gore and global warming.
Right, right. I mean, you know, so that's their response. And my personal opinion is that that's a weak response. There has been a resurgence in interest in keeping bees. And just in our beekeeping school, just since April, I ran the numbers yesterday, we have trained 2,460 people to be beekeepers. That's just since April. And
there's also tax incentives.
To having hives on your land. That's right. Because bees are treated like cattle in Texas. I don't know about other states, but if you have a hive, you know, or if you have a certain amount of hives and you have them for a certain amount of time on your land, then definitely there's a tax abating benefit to it. So,
well, we've had a link to your website up there on the screen, but people can visit that there and find out more. Konrad, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And good job to the folks exposing what they're doing with the so-called honey. It's kind of like this pasteurized milk. It's not really even milk. It's more like a liquid cheese. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go to break and come back with some hardcore information with Gerald Celente. I mean, it's time to get your money out of the big banks. It's time to if you've got gold, to physically hold it, because they stole his gold. They stole his gold. Russia earlier today, got him on to talk about the world economy meltdown he predicted. And he said, by the way, let me just announce to everybody they've stolen my gold. He was keeping his gold in a safety deposit type banking system, and it's been taken by a company that, quote, collapsed. And you're going to see this more and more. I mean, this is a depression. This is serious, serious business, and we have criminals running our society. We're going to go to break. Gerald Celente, straight ahead. If you believe in this information and want to support its viral spread, go to the INFOWARS store.